generative AI is fascinating, right? So the benefits are myriad, and on their whole, most likely outweigh some of the more nefarious risks. But we can't ignore the opportunities that are provided to criminals by using generative AI. So first and foremost, we've got how much or just the ease of creating content, whether that's the landing page itself now becomes much more passable, right? It's free of grammar mistakes, anything that might trigger you to say, okay, this page looks off, right? So there's that. There's using generative AI for the imagery and the creative itself. Okay, that's a problem. Now you have more provocative imagery produced at a much faster rate. You don't have to have somebody even with poor Photoshop skills, right, making these in the background. So generative AI is about scale, and it's about, unfortunately, infinite variation. So if we use methods that look for patterns and say, hey, we've seen this bit of code before, it's bad. If we see it again, it's also bad.
Yeah.
Well, infinite variation gets rid of that, right? That's no longer a method that we can use. So some of our traditional countermeasures for mitigating this are out the window with generative AI.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to be chatting with Michael Lyden today, who is the VP of Threat Intelligence at TAG. So not everyone knows what TAG is. So why don't you first, give the elevator pitch on TAG, and then we'll get more specifically into your role.
Certainly. So TAG, or the Trustworthy Accountability Group, we are a voluntary standards organization for the digital advertising industry, focused on fighting criminal exploitation of the digital advertising supply chain and promoting trust and transparency in that same supply chain.
Great. Well, everyone's probably, if not been the direct target of a piece of malware, is familiar with malware that may have snuck into the overall ad ecosystem. So I'd love to understand more about the malvertisers and sort of, the continuum from the somewhat, less scary ones to the ones that are quite obnoxious and tend to, trick grandma into giving her savings away.
Yeah, certainly. So, I come to the advertising industry from a nearly 20-year career in the U.S. intelligence community, fighting threat actors there and still continuing to fight threat actors in my current job. And there's actually some interesting similarities between how sophisticated our criminal adversaries are in the world of malvertising, for example, compared to with some of the complex organized criminal groups that I worked with from a law enforcement perspective throughout my career. And these malvertisers, as we kind of use from the common parlance, they range dramatically from very sophisticated groups that are dedicated to either pushing malware out into the world for usually the purpose of stealing money, right? Through sophisticated social engineering scammers who will try to use ads to enable very sophisticated social engineering scams. Then all the way down to the low quality ads that may end up directing you towards sites that harbor nefarious content, misinformation, disinformation, pirated content, digital media, things like that. So there's a whole spectrum of really sophisticated. We want to push malware to you, all the way through. We want you to download movies from a pirated site.
Right. So on the social engineering side, I guess that's often the weak point, even if it's not socially engineered at the initial screen that you see. They're going to often, I guess, try to social engineer the next step. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as to whether or not AI makes it easier for these bad actors, to potentially socially engineer that call to action.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point, and for certain, I think first though we need to step back and say, okay, why social engineering? Well, while malvertising sort of implies malware, over the last year, we've kind of stepped back and we've published a malvertising taxonomy where we still include malware as that core component for a lot of this nefarious behavior. But because modern browsers have gotten so secure, it's harder than ever to download malware from an ad. Really, it requires you as the internet user to do something, right? To click through a series of prompts and install the malware or install some other kind of software at the behest of a criminal group. So social engineering really becomes that key method for criminal groups to get you to do something. Now, what they're trying to get you to do varies. Increasingly, we see pretty complex scams around Bitcoin investment. There's some famous groups out there. One of the ones with name recognition in our industry is called FizzCore, for example, and they use provocative celebrity imagery with a tagline: "You won't believe what celebrity X did last night," to get you to click through, and you end up on a landing page that has nothing to do with the celebrity. And as you click through the landing pages, eventually you end up at the 1-800 invest your money in Bitcoin opportunity kind of scam, right? Where you end up in a call center and those people then talk you through how to invest your cash, right? So that's really the kind of the more nefarious side of what we see. Social engineering, right, at its root is about manipulating people's emotions. And so you need to get that first click, right? Whether, again, it's a provocative, creative, whether it's using a political statement that you could agree or disagree with, right? You just need to click.
Yeah.
And that's where social engineering comes in.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, if you're using clickbaity looking ads, right, and their success metric is getting the click, it's very difficult for Tag or anywhere else to police what the landing page looks like, right? Because that could even change from the original, upload of an ad into being ad trafficked into a DSP. The landing page could change dramatically 10 minutes after the ad is approved.
Yeah,
So,
so the simple things like changing the landing page, but there's also very sophisticated measures like cloaking and using sort of what we call stealth technologies to hide the true content of that site, from the DSP. Or, if you're really nefarious, you could go after and hack the landing page itself of a perfectly good recognized page or small website, and then change the content that way.
Right. And where does sort of multi-channel phishing fit into this?
This is a fascinating and scary concept. So in the world of traditional cybersecurity, if we just step back from digital advertising for a moment, there's this concept called multi-channel phishing, where a bad guy sends the kind of emails that we're all familiar with, a phishing email saying, we're changing our payment invoice system. Please click here to process your new bank account information. But then how do you make sure that A, you can reinforce that message, and B, make it through increasingly sophisticated email spam filters, right? Those are getting better. So what you do is you come at the user from multiple channels, right? You can reinforce that phishing email with a text message, something that we call SMS phishing or smishing. You can reinforce it with a voicemail, vishing. And now, because of the kind of ubiquity of hyper-targeted and geolocated ads, you can use an ad to reinforce that same message. So if you're purveying, say, a new kind of software, or you want to say, hey, update to the latest version of WhatsApp, you can send a WhatsApp ad that's fake, of course, along with the phishing email and everything else that reinforces what the criminal's end goal is, right? To download that malicious software or send bank account information or whatever it is that they're trying to get you to do.
Yeah, one of my concerns over the next year is that due to the ease with which you can do AI-focused voice cloning, that we actually see folks essentially creating fake political ads with voices that you and I would recognize of politicians, with calls to action, where it's not even a political landing page, right? It may look like one,
Yeah.
but you sort of think like that's going to be really ripe for people's abuse, because the emotional triggers are so strong on both sides of the aisle there.
Generative AI is fascinating, right? So the benefits are myriad, and a on their whole most likely outweigh some of the more nefarious risks, but we can't ignore the opportunities that are provided to criminals by using generative AI. So first and foremost, we've got how much or just the ease of creating content, whether that's the landing page itself now becomes much more passable, right? It's free of grammar mistakes, anything that might trigger you to say, okay, this page looks off, right? So there's that. There's using generative AI for the imagery and the creative itself. Okay, that's a problem. Now you have more provocative imagery produced at a much faster rate. You don't have to have somebody even with poor Photoshop skills, right, making these in the background. So generative AI is about scale, and it's about, unfortunately, infinite variation. So if we use methods that look for patterns and say, hey, we've seen this bit of code before, it's bad. If we see it again, it's also bad. Well, infinite variation gets rid of that, right? That's no longer a method that we can use. So some of our traditional countermeasures for mitigating this are out the window with generative AI. Then you get into the video and the voice. I've seen firsthand instances where criminals have used a CEO's voice taken from YouTube to craft those phishing voicemail messages, right, and leave them for employees to say, it sounds like your boss saying, hey, I'm in desperate need of help, please send this right now. And some number of folks obviously respond, especially when it sounds just like your boss. And I've heard some of these voicemails firsthand, so I know how effective they can be.
Right. Now, is that outside of TAG's purview, or is it sort of tangential to it?
So if you had asked me that question, when I first joined TAG 18 months ago, I probably would have said yes. But my view on this is changing. Criminals have become, let's just back it up for a minute. They're opportunistic by nature, and they're going to go wherever the defenses are weakest. So the digital advertising industry, I think historically we've kind of put on blinders and said, okay, I'm responsible for ad fraud. I'm responsible for keeping ads off pirated content sites. I'm ad quality. I'm ad ops. I fight malvertising. And we've siloed ourselves off, right? Both along that supply chain, so sort of vertically, but then horizontally, right? Amongst businesses who compete in the same sectors. Where our criminal adversaries don't do that. They look at the ecosystem as a whole, starting at enterprise level cybersecurity, right? All how secure is your company, all the way through that digital advertising supply chain, looking for vulnerable points to exploit. So while we can focus on one specific area, we sort of lose sight of the forest for the trees. Stepping back, we realize that our criminal adversary is nimble, moves along that supply chain. We in turn also need to be nimble, right? And that can mean thinking about how enterprise cybersecurity and the same threat actors there are the same threat actors that we focus in malvertising. That means talking to each other in a collective defense model, which is part of what TAG offers through our malvertising threat exchange, where we can share those indicators of compromise horizontally, right, as well as vertically on that supply chain. So it's become a different beast, right? That the bad guys are flexible, they are nimble, and we need to be equally flexible and nimble in our response.
Right. Do you guys find yourselves cooperating with law enforcement at the national and local level in some cases?
We do. So there has to be cooperation within our industry. That's really important. Cooperation with, so the key cyber players who are around our industry, whether those are vendors who provide support, anti-fraud, anti-malvertising, or traditional cybersecurity work. And then there's our partnerships with law enforcement. So we work closely with, for example, the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK. They have a very mature and nuanced view of malvertising and how to fight it. So they're one of our international partners. We work closely in the US with the Intellectual Property Rights Coordination Center as we fight ad-enabled piracy. Then, of course, there's the US Critical Infrastructure and Critical Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, part of the Department of Homeland Security, another organization that we have to work with to make sure that we stay abreast of the latest trends and adversarial activity. And it's a two-way street, right? We take information from them, and we also share information about trends that we see with those federal agencies.
One thing I'd love to get your thoughts on, and I'm not sure if you've got an opinion on it or not, but in a past life, I had a browser extension that was part of a company that we had, and part of the challenge was really building trust because there were bad actors in the category. And I would imagine that, for companies that have browser extensions now, like, Capital One's app or Honey or Rakuten's app, that they perhaps face a little bit of a headwind in running their businesses because of the bad actors. And do you feel like that is true in general, that the sort of bad actors create this sort of distrust in everybody and everything, to the point where you need to actually invest more in marketing or more in trust building as a marketer to overcome that headwind?
Yeah, I think as an internet user and I look at a website, and if I click on a bad ad on that site where 99% of them might be good, I don't know if I'm going to go back and differentiate between the good ads and the bad ads. I know I got them from that publisher. Something bad happened, and then my entire view of ads, digital marketing is hurt. My view of that publisher is hurt, and it could be well beyond the publisher's control. The
Right.
exploit could be somewhere deep in that ad tech supply chain, completely outside of the publisher's control. It may be out of the marketer's control, right? Their creative could have been stolen and used to as clickbait effectively, right? And so, it's a really good argument for this collective defense model. No individual company has enough breadth and depth of knowledge to fight this on their own, let alone the resources to do it, right?
Right.
But come together as an industry, think about this holistically, then there's something to that, right? Then we can begin to say, okay, we can coordinate our efforts to counter and mitigate bad actors in our world. The bad actors, they don't coordinate. That's our big advantage. So if we have to think about, wow, trust in our ecosystem is a collective threat, collective defense is really the best response. And that's something we believe a great deal of about at TAG, I should say, the threat sharing concept, right? That's why we run the threat exchange to bring companies together to share this sort of information.
So are there any players, without naming names, but just at a category level, that you sort of wish were more plugged into TAG from a data sharing perspective to allow you guys to sort of help protect everybody better?
You know what? This is going to sound a little Pollyanna-ish, but I'm really happy with the breadth of companies that we have who are part of this threat exchange. We cover big platforms, DSPs, SSPs, ad tech vendors, right? It's that whole ecosystem is really in the room together. This final frontier, right, is then bringing in the advertising agencies to be part of that, right? Because they care about that digital advertising supply chain at the very start. So now we're beginning to have those conversations about how we incorporate in their threat intelligence programs into this greater ecosystem, right? Both from a enterprise level, where we talk about, okay, what are those threats to our company that are existential, that are cyber in nature, all the way through how are bad guys exploiting our digital supply chain. Because again, if you're a marketer or an advertising agency, you don't have control, right, over that entire ad. There's 20 companies that are touching your ad before it ends up at the publisher. We need to have that whole group at the table talking about our collective defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing between the 302 redirects that are there for a variety of purposes and the wrappers that are there for a variety of purposes, whether it's measurement or brand safety or humanity that it's being checked. Do you feel like any particular point in that bunch of hops and skips and wrappers that you think is a weak point that perhaps needs a little bit more attention?
Yeah. So, over the next year, I plan on spending a great deal of time working with those companies in the affiliate world, right? So when you have a lot of kind of self-service work going on, working in channels that a lot of traditional advertisers aren't in, whether it be pharmaceuticals, gambling, adult content, et cetera, then there becomes an opportunity for nefarious actors to sort of come in and exploit those ecosystems. And I want to make sure that companies that work in the affiliate network world, right, have access to the same sort of threat intelligence, and understanding of the threat actors as those who work in these big traditional platforms, the DSPs, SSPs, exchanges, et cetera, right? Who have a fairly sophisticated understanding of what's going on. So that entire ecosystem, though, includes the world of affiliate marketing, and we need to make sure that they're equally taken care of as part of this.
Yeah, that brings me to sort of an additional question that hadn't even occurred to me, but the idea that an influencer could actually end up falling for something, right? And then inadvertently transmitting that same, issue or problem out to their followers, right? Have there been any instances that you could think of without naming names, given that influencer marketing and the reach and power of influencer marketing is predicated on trust, right? Like, I trust this person, and I trust them more than often even a big publisher, right? Because they're an individual, they're a human that I almost feel like I have a personal relationship with.
Yeah, so I haven't seen it bridge into the physical yet, right? In cybersecurity, we talk about the physical cyber divide, but what we do see are low quality or sometimes malicious ads served next to those influencers because of the nature of self-service and how self-service ads kind of work in that affiliate world. And that scares me, right? And then that's where I want to make sure that TAG has the additional reach to communicate those threats to those organizations who are part of that ecosystem, that part of digital advertising.
Right. Well, either industry-wide or with regards to your own specific, to-do list for next year, is there anything you're excited about for 2024?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I'm really excited about. So the TAG Threat Exchange has been focused primarily on malvertising over the last several years. We have two sort of expansions in 2024. One which we announced a little bit earlier this year is a focus on piracy. Specifically, how do we demonetize ad-supported pirated content? So there's back to those idea that the criminals move around much more nimbly than we do sometimes. There's lots of websites out there that sell or give free access to digital content, movies, streaming, sports, etc., right? And those exist because they sell ads next to them, right? And how do we make sure that we can help demonetize those ads to make that a less profitable initiative for criminals, and therefore in the background fighting IP theft, like intellectual property rights theft. So that's really an interesting way that we're expanding, working with some major studios that are part of TAG's Leadership Council to help push that effort. So we'll basically be working to notify brands as well as the ad tech companies in the supply chain for those ads placed on pirated content sites, right? Really, really hoping to demonetize that part of it. That works in conjunction with lots of great efforts by, say, MPA, RIA, and others to go after those pirated sites legally, right? So there's sort of the legal law enforcement side of things, and then there's the demonetization side of things. And we really want to help support the demonetization. The second area is the expansion into traditional cybersecurity for the digital advertising industry, providing a forum at the enterprise level for the CISOs of the companies who are part of our industry to coordinate and collaborate on the threats that we face collectively. It's our collective defense model. As the digital advertising industry's official DHS designated information sharing analysis organization, we have that ability to provide traditional cybersecurity threat sharing capabilities to our industry.
Well, that sounds super exciting, but there's got to be a sheriff, or at least somebody who's one call away from the sheriff.
Yeah.
If you guys need to bring in law enforcement, it sounds like you've got, unfortunately, you've got a full plate of stuff to work on over the next year. And it's great to see you guys continuing to sort of keep the internet safe for all of us.
Yeah, thank you. It's important to me to work for an organization that's mission driven. That's really what helps me get up in the morning and go to work and fight the good fight. And TAG really is a mission driven organization with great people who care deeply about protecting both our industry and the consumer online from digital harm. So it's a wonderful mission, and I'm fortunate to be a part of it.
Great. Well, thanks so much for sharing your vision for the future and enlightening us on everything you guys are doing thus far.
Thanks for being here.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.